Friday, 5 p.m. Rain on the porch, light in the hall. Son and daughter-in-law stand in the doorway, wet, scared, broke. Mother, just one night. Mother keeps one hand on the frame, one on the keys. I love you. And no. The door closes. 3 months earlier, bright sun, no rain. Son loads the last suitcase into mother-in-law's white SUV. Daughter-in-law smirks at the porch. Enjoy your thrift store life. The car turned toward the gated dream. Back to now, the dream is gone. A bright notice on iron, public auction. Bills, fake smiles, unpaid chairs after fancy parties. Phone rings. Can you spot 4,800? Mother looks at her fridge list. Roof, tax, grout. Not this time. Click. Silence becomes a new sound. Mother swaps a faucet, paints a wall, finds old wood with stories, brings home a beagle named Maple. The house breathes again. Tonight, the rideshare idles at the curb. The driver knocks, soft. They're $12 short. Neighbors watch. Daughter-in-law drops her eyes. Please, says son. I love you, and no. The door closes. The day my son Tyler loaded the last suitcase into his mother-in-law's white SUV, the air smelt like rain even though the sun was out. I stood on my front porch with my keys in one hand and a dish towel in the other because I had been drying a casserole dish when the doorbell rang. The street was quiet except for a couple of boys on scooters and Mrs. Kowalski trimming a rosebush 2 houses down. Sienna smoothed the front of her dress like she was about to step onto a runway and gave my porch a look you reserve for something sticky on the bottom of your shoe. Enjoy your thrift store life, Marge. She said it loud enough for the whole block to hear. She said it like a line she'd been practicing in the mirror. She said it to land. I felt it land. The boys on the scooters quit scooting. Mrs. Kowalski's clippers froze midair. Tyler slid into the driver's seat and stared straight ahead, as if not making eye contact would make it cleaner. He kissed the air near my cheek, an inch away from touching me. And for a second, I could still smell the cereal he ate when he was a kid, the one he'd crunch at my kitchen table while swinging his legs. He said, "We've got to go," without looking up, and the door thunked shut. They rolled toward Bath Township like the gates were already opening, the lane already lined with gardeners, the house already full of soft lighting and better futures. When the SUV turned the corner, the street breathed again. The boys started up. The clippers clicked. I didn't move until the engine sounds washed out, and even then I only stepped inside because the casserole dish was going to slip if my hands kept sweating like that. I set the dish in the rack and stood at the sink. The lemon-patterned curtains I sewed when Tyler was 9 looked faded at the edges. The clock made a noise I hadn't heard when the house was full. It ticked like it was working too hard. Somewhere, a lawnmower grumbled to life, and the refrigerator hummed. And right there, between the hum and the tick, I heard the first sound of a new silence I would come to know. It has weight, that kind of silence. It settles into the drawer where you keep the fancier napkins that hardly see daylight. It rides shotgun to the store. It walks around the block with you and doesn't say a word. I didn't cry until I went to wipe the counter and realized I was polishing a house for a person who didn't live here anymore. Then I cried enough for 3 people. When you live alone long enough, the sound of the house becomes your second language. I learned the tone of the furnace kicking in and the soft complaint of the stair where the wood is tired. I knew the whir of the toothbrush in the charger and how wind sounds when it tests the window it might like to leak through. I filed those sounds next to other things I learned in my 62 years. How to make a pot roast tender without a fancy cut. How to change the flapper in a toilet tank when it keeps running. how to show up when you'd rather disappear. The Friday after they left, I showed up to my job at the Senior Center gift shop and smiled at everyone who came in to buy crossword puzzle books and birthday cards. I said, "Find everything okay?" And "Do you want that gift wrapped?" Until the phrases came out like a song I didn't choose but knew all the words too. On Tuesday, I stood in Gypsy's diner with my coworker, my friend, Patrice, and watched her drown pancakes in syrup like it was a medical necessity. Patrice has the kind of face people tell secrets to. She did 20 years at the county clerk's office and then went back to school at 49 to become a paralegal. She knows how to find things. She knows how to sit with you while you say hard words and not make you feel like you've done something wrong for saying them. "Two things," she said, cutting a perfect square of pancake like she'd trained for it. "One, you document. Dates, phone calls, what they said, what you said, anything you think you'll forget, write it down. Two, you remember your age is not a weakness, it's a shield. You're 62. In Ohio, there are words for what happens when older folks get abandoned or exploited. I'm not saying sue your son. I'm saying know your rights so you don't forget you have them." I didn't want to drag him through court, I said. "Who said anything about dragging?" she said, dabbing her mouth with her napkin and lowering her voice. "This is about you not getting dragged. That's different." I wrote it down in a notebook I picked up at Dollar General. I wrote the day they left and the word "see" in it shows, and the moment Tyler looked down at the steering wheel like the horn might save him. I wrote the day I opened the freezer and realized the lasagna I'd made for one of those crazy weeks had no one to be useful to anymore. I wrote that I wanted to set the lasagna on the porch with a note that said, "You forgot this." Instead, I put it in the oven and ate one square standing up because I couldn't yet stand to do a full dinner like a normal person. 3 weeks passed. I raked, I cleaned out the coat closet and found all the mittens that lost their partners. I hammered a loose board on the back fence and waved at the neighbor's lab. I went to church and tucked my hand into the same place on the pew that had known my hand 30 years. At night, sleep came like a bad date, late and not much to look at. I watched a show about home renovations and got mad at people who said things like, "This kitchen just doesn't have the wow factor." I went to the garage and took the broken broom to the curb. The first clue that all was not velvet and valet where Tyler had gone didn't come as gossip. It came as a rectangle of bright orange slapped onto an iron gate behind a wall of ivy. Mrs. Kowalski made a habit of walking the good neighborhoods the way some folks walk the mall. "Lovely cardio," she called it. She came back from a Saturday route with a glow and a photo. "You didn't hear this from me," and she shoved her phone at me over the mailbox with the casualness of a spy. The photo showed a notice, the kind I'd seen on empty storefronts and sad houses where the paint peels first. Public auction, case number, court name. It was posted at the edge of the only mansion within 5 miles whose landscaping looked like a magazine cover. I recognized the curve of the driveway because Sienna had posted a boomerang of it on Instagram. The caption something like, "Morning run around the grounds. Patrons tagged, hashtags ripe and smug." "Could be the LLC that owns it, not the people inside," Patrice said when I texted her the picture. 15 minutes later, she called back. Bingo. Bath Township deed search. That manor is in the name of a shell company registered to a P.O. box. And your pal Genevieve, she's the registered agent of 2 other entities, both of which show liens. Look at this. Contractor filed a complaint last month for non-payment. Oh, and Better Business Bureau isn't a corp, but the complaints tell a story. What kind of story? The kind when you throw a party with other people's chairs and hope they don't ask for them back. I felt an uncharitable humor rise in my throat. I didn't laugh. I folded a towel. When the phone finally rang and it was Tyler, the sound made my bones vibrate. He didn't start with hello or I love you. He started with numbers. "Hey, Mom, can you spot us 4800 just for a bit? It's urgent." "For what?" "Bills. Things came up." "What kind of things?" I could hear the hard edges in my voice. They surprised me. "Why do you always—" He stopped as if someone had walked into the room. When he came back, his voice had a layer of patience, like someone had ironed it. Mom, please, just say yes. I live in a house with a gate. It has names for the rooms, pantry, parlor. You know the kind of rooms I mean. I've seen the pictures. It's complicated. He swallowed, and I heard the throat I used to kiss when he was a feverish toddler. Are you going to help or not? I looked at the list on my fridge. Roof flashing, bathroom grout, property tax due April. The things that make up a life look boring until you don't have them. I looked at Maple's empty spot by the back door and didn't know it would belong to a dog who hadn't met me yet. I'm not, I said. I did not flinch. Not this time. Well, figures, he said, and the call ended like a door slamming on a windy day. It's one thing to say no to a telemarketer. It's another to say it to a person whose first birthday cake you baked at midnight because you got home late from work. And he felt so small when the candle drooped. I went to the bathroom and ran the faucet and cried as if the house needed proof I still belonged to someone. Then I went to Ace Hardware and asked a lanky boy named Marcus how to replace a kitchen faucet. He wrote down the part number with the intensity of a surgeon. You'll need plumber's putty and patience and a towel under the sink because you're going to swear you turned off the right valve and then the hot water will tell you otherwise. Anything else? Yeah, he said, leaning across the counter. Confidence. You can borrow some of mine until yours shows up. Back home, I turned off the main water valve, mostly out of fear, and climbed under the sink. I don't know why it felt like church down there. Maybe it was because I was in a small space with something older than me humming nearby. I put down the towel like Marcus said, then a second towel, because I know my life. When the old faucet finally came free, I laughed. It was ugly and cheap and probably older than the lemon curtains, and still, there it had been, doing its job every day without thanks. I set the new one and tightened and untightened, then tightened again. I turned the house water back on like I was cutting a ribbon at a ceremony. The faucet didn't leak. I stood very still and listened. The tick of the kitchen clock, the hum of the fridge, the aftersound of water becoming still again like a lake deciding not to be a river. After that, the brush felt light in my hand. I rolled fresh eggshell onto the living room walls, chasing scuffs into history. I ripped up the old rug and found hardwood with stories. The wood had seen high school dances and flu nights and the time Tyler spilled red Kool-Aid and we both cried because it looked like blood. I warmed the wood with a damp rag and wished I'd done it sooner. I inserted new bulbs into the dim ceiling fixture and watched the room come awake. When I pushed the couch back against the wall, I realized I had made a different house without buying anything fancy. Just paint, putty, and time. That's the day I drove to animal control just to look. A beagle sat in a kennel with hopeful eyes and a wag that didn't stop even when she fell asleep. The card on the cage said Maple, 6 years old, surrendered because her person moved to a building that didn't allow dogs. She's got a slow gear, the volunteer said, opening the door, and an extra gear if she hears a bag of snacks opening within a 2-block radius. Maple pressed her head under my palm like she'd been saving that spot for me. In the car on the way home, she paced as far as the seatbelt tether allowed, and then circled and collapsed with a sigh that sounded like relief. At the first red light, I put my hand on her back and felt something clear and soft rise in me, like a screen being listed on a window I thought was painted shut. When you bring a dog into a house, you become someone who narrates walks for a living. We're turning left, I said to Maple the first day on our block. She looked up like this was exactly the news she'd been waiting for. The neighbor kids asked to pet her, and Maple accepted compliments as if they were rent. After we made a loop, we sat on the porch and watched older kids teach younger kids how to keep chalk on the sidewalk and not on socks. I poured a glass of iced tea, and for a full minute the silence had another sound in it, a dog's breath, a collar tag ticking, the idea that I was not the last person in the room. On the night that rain flew sideways and the wind rattled loose thoughts, a rideshare idled at my curb. I knew it was for me the way you know when a letter isn't junk. Two figures stood in the porch light, soaked and sloppy at the edges of their expensive clothes. My porch light painted a circle on the steps, and they stood just outside it. "Ma'am," the driver said, knocked soft against the door frame, "they're $12 short." "Andre," his dash sticker said. He looked like a man who has seen stories run out of gas at every exit ramp. Tyler's hair stuck to his forehead like he was a teenager who'd played a whole game without a hat. Sienna's mascara had given up and gone home. "Mom," Tyler said, and I felt the word snag on something in his throat. "We need to talk." "You said we'd never need one of these houses again," Sienna muttered, then looked at me with an expression I'd seen exactly never: embarrassment. 3 months ago, they drove away like this house was a stain they couldn't get out. 3 months ago, I stood on this porch and heard my name said like a problem. I thought of the list on my fridge and the paint drying on the living room walls and the dog asleep in a crescent at my feet. "We messed up," Tyler said. "Please, just for tonight." I kept my hand on the doorway. The wood was smooth and familiar under my palm. If you knew how many times I'd touched that place, you could calculate my life. "No," I said. The rain found its rhythm again. Mr. Whittemore, who has never missed an opportunity to pretend to take out the trash, adjusted his lid and waited for a fight that wasn't coming. Mrs. Kowalski's bedroom lamp glowed. Sienna's shoulders dropped like wet laundry. "Andre, I didn't order this ride," I said. He looked at the street, did some math in his head, took what they could pay and left without making a scene. He didn't slam his door. He didn't peel away. He drove like a person who'd been wet longer than he meant to. "St. Luke's has a 3-night Seltzer," Mrs. Kowalski called from her porch, surprising herself with the sound of her own voice. "Pastor Rick will take you. I'll drive." Tyler looked at me as if I might change shape. For 1/2 second, I saw the boy he was, the one who carried a baseball glove to bed because the Little League coach asked if anyone wanted to pitch, and he raised his hand like raising your hand was a way to get picked up, not a way to get picked apart. "Please," he said. "I love you," I said, because it was true. And no. I closed the door and stood with my back against it and cried until Maple came and pressed her head against my shin. If I had expected to feel nothing but triumphant, I would have disappointed myself. I felt like a person who had cut a rope in a storm and watched their boat drift just enough to miss the rocks. It felt like relief and grief and something like sobriety. I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling and counted the first 10 minutes and then the next 10 and thought of everything we say that isn't required to be true. Family is everything. Blood is thicker than water. A good mother opens the door. In the morning, I put on my coat and told Maple we were going to buy dog food as if it were a ceremony. The air smelled like wet leaves and new rules. In the dog aisle at Meijer, I reached for a bag that weighed as much as a child and felt a song start in my throat. A voice behind me said, "Eleanor?" I turned and realized the person in front of me had never addressed me by my first name. Genevieve wore sunglasses inside like she was married to the sun. Her hair looked expensive even with the rain's opinion. The cart held organic laundry detergent and a single pair, neither of which had a chance in the world of being paid for with cash. She said, "Marjorie," fake soft, "how are you settling into your quieter life?" "It's Marge, and fine." I shifted the dog food into the cart like it didn't strain my back. Maple sniffed the corner of Genevieve's purse and made a face like it had secrets. "I heard things aren't going according to plan," I added, not because I wanted to provoke, but because I had stopped agreeing to other people's versions of the truth. She took off her sunglasses slowly, the way people do when they want a moment to land. Her eyes were tired at the edges, the kind of tired you can't fix with serum. She said, "You know," and those two words held both question and accusation. "Everything is fine. We're simply restructuring. You would know nothing about it." "I know about sheriff's sale notices," I said, and watched the color leave her face like someone had opened a drain. "I know about LLCs that don't pay contractors. I know the Better Business Bureau isn't court, but a complaint reads like a paragraph you don't want." "Watch your mouth," she hissed, the polite veneer cracking to show something sharp underneath. "You don't know who you're talking to." Someone who taught her daughter that a kitchen with a scuff on the baseboard means failure? Someone who could have given her son-in-law a stool to stand on and chose a pedestal instead so she could kick it out later. I know enough. A manager walked by and Genevieve performed the smile like a trick. "You'll regret this," she said to me in a lower voice. "Oh, I already regret a lot of things. Not this." Back home, I set the dog food down and laughed until Maple wagged in time with me. It wasn't that I had beaten her. I hadn't. It was that I had made a new choice, and the muscles I used to make it or soar in a way that promised strength. The Akron Beacon-Journal ran a piece 2 weeks later with a headline that did the work. "Prominent philanthropist indicted on fraud and tax charges." I didn't need the details. The details were predictable. Fake invoices, a foundation that was mostly a funnel, parties thrown with the future as collateral. Patrice texted me a link and 3 words: "Consequences take time." I saw Sienna at Dollar General the next afternoon with a basket of bleach and paper towels and nothing extra. Her face had that fresh, washed look of someone whose routine no longer includes an hour in front of a mirror. She saw me and didn't flinch. She didn't look for a side aisle to disappear into. She stood there like a person waiting to see if they're going to be hit or hugged, and braced her heart for either. "I'm cleaning offices," she said to the shelf, not because I asked, but because telling me the truth was part of the tax on her life now. "I hope you get the good clients," I said, and I meant it. Her mouth trembled and her chin fought. "Thank you," she said, like a person who hasn't heard those words said without sugar or poison in months. On the 1st of May, a money order arrived without a return address and a note in Tyler's block letters, the ones he learned when his 2nd-grade teacher taught the class how to make their letters stand up straight even when life doesn't. "Mom, I got a job in a small engineering firm in Cuyahoga Falls. It's not much yet. We're in a studio over a pizza shop. I'm trying. Cian is trying. We're both sorry. Here is something small to start." He tucked in a photo of Sienna stirring a dented pot on a dorm-sized stove, her hair up and her face as clean as the pot was bent. She looked like a person making soup, because soup is what you make when you need to feel like home doesn't cost as much as a gate. The money order was for $300. I didn't know whether to cash it or frame it. I cashed it and put the receipt in the drawer where I kept the neighbor kids' graduation invites. Another money order came in June, $275, with a note about their budget. One of the windows at the new place didn't stay open without a stick. He joked about it. I smiled out loud reading it, and Maple cocked her head as if I'd said a word she loved. In July, there was a photocopy of what looked like a counseling schedule. Sienna had circled her name in pink and written, "This is awful and hard, and I'm going even when I don't want to." In August, Tyler's money order came with a quiet knock. When I looked out the window, he stood on the sidewalk with a manila folder like a passport. "I'm not here to come in," he said through the screen. "I'm here to give you this." He passed the folder through the biap. Inside was a notarized affidavit drafted on legal aid letterhead revoking any potential claim he could ever imagine a person might claim on my house now and in any future that matters. He also included copies of the deed, the tax statements, and a note that said, "In case I ever forget what I promised." "I never put you on the deed," I said, more tired than mean. It's not the number. It's us saying we understand there was a number. There were 5 crisp hundreds inside and the crinkle of dignity. This doesn't fix anything, I said, and in my head I stood back to look at myself saying it and thought, look at you. We know, Tyler said, and he looked at Maple and bowed his head like you do to a small good thing you don't deserve. I didn't invite them in. After they left, I took Maple to Cascade Valley Metro Park and sat on a bench where the river proves you can move forward without rushing. The water made what water makes. My heart learned the sound. I didn't know if forgiveness was going to come. I knew I could live without it, but I also knew sometimes people tell you they're changing just to get you on the porch, and sometimes they tell you and then they do it even when the porch stays closed. The trick, Patrice said, is to find out which kind you're dealing with without destroying yourself. By September, the money order drawer had a thickness to it that took up psychic space. I installed a deadbolt on the back door because Patrice said if you're going to make metaphors about locks, you might as well have the hardware. I joined a Thursday women's game night because Ruth at church wouldn't leave me alone until I showed up. Ruth wears bracelets that jingle when she laughs, and she laughs like a person who remembers to put her joy out front where it can be seen. We ate chips and told true things, and someone's daughter stopped by with a casserole pan to return. "Keep it," the mother said, and everyone in the room gasped like a miracle happened. When the first frost came, a retired fire captain named Ben carried 2 bags of water softener salt up my steps without asking. "You look like the kind of person who'd rather turn help down than accept it," he said, setting the bags down as if they were props in a play he'd acted in before. He had brown eyes and a way of not filling silence that made me want to keep talking. "We're doing this, huh?" I said, because my mouth did not check in with my brain. "Doing what?" he asked, smiling like he'd hope I'd say that. "Acting like you didn't notice Maple has already decided who you are?" Maple licked his knuckles as if endorsing him for public office. He nodded solemnly, accepting his appointment. "I make a mean chili," he said, "and I've been told my porch swing repair is above average." "Above average is a sexier phrase than you know," I said, and we both stood there like teenagers who just discovered banter. I didn't invite him either. This was a season for porches and edges and staying in the doorway long enough to check for drafts. The second week of November, I was at the VFW hall for line dancing, and someone's aunt had made cinnamon rolls that tasted like an apology. We did the electric slide like we meant it, and my hips remembered a life when they moved for joy and not just for climbing stairs and getting the laundry up. Ruth high-fived me and said, "You're getting your sparkle back," and I put my hand to my chest without meaning to. On the Saturday before Thanksgiving, Tyler locked with a pan of baked ziti and a look like a person who's memorized the house rules. He stood at the fence, not the door, and nodded at the deadbolt like a person who appreciates good hardware. "Not a drop-in," he said quickly, and asked, "Could we bring dinner next Sunday at 2 and cook it here? If the answer is no, we'll leave the ziti and go. You bring the salad. I'll provide plates. You leave by 5 even if we're having a grand old time." "Yes, ma'am," he said without sarcasm, and left like a person who had been given a shift at a good job and didn't want to blow it. They came at 2. Sienna wiped her feet on the mat without looking to see if I noticed. Tyler washed his hands as soon as he came in and dried them on a towel like someone raised with manners my house did give him even when he decided to forget. Sienna asked where I keep the colander and didn't roll her eyes when I said bottom drawer left as if that was where it was supposed to be in a non-rich house. Tyler set the table with the care of a person who has broken the good plates before and learned you can't sweep some things away. We ate. We talked about unremarkable human things, the draft that slips under the back door, the Browns inventing new ways to lose, the best place to buy tires that aren't fancy but won't get you killed. We did not talk about Genevieve or Bath Township or words that were said on a porch that now feels like a different country. It wasn't a television redemption with swelling music and a hug and slow motion. It was awkward and humble and good. It was seed planting. I sent them home with nothing but their coats and the rules we'd stated out loud. At Christmas, the drawer had 10 months of money orders, each one a thumbprint of effort. I still hadn't spent most of them. I didn't know what they were for yet. Maybe for a roof, maybe for a new furnace if the current one tired out, maybe for nothing at all, just proof, stacked like bricks against a future version of me who might try to tell me I imagined the work they did. I sent a card that said Happy Holidays with a picture of Maple in a scarf and didn't sign it Mom. I wrote Marge, like a woman who knows how to be two things at once, mother and person. The card came back to me in my head a dozen times, and I checked the mailbox more than I'll admit. They sent a photo in January of Sienna standing in a kitchen 10 feet wide, holding a bowl of something like soup and grinning like the person she used to be is not gone, just busy getting better. On a Tuesday in late January, my front walk turned into an ice rink the way Ohio does it, quick and casual and with no regard for the bone density of its citizens. Ben showed up with a bag of salt and a wooden stick he'd screwed a bottle cap to for traction. "I've got you," he said, and salted like a person brushing teeth. Casually, thoroughly, daily. I poured him a small glass of cider, and we talked about roofs and baseball and whether we believed this would be the winter the furnace retired or just the one where it threatened to. Maple fell in love 6 times while he sat there and forgave me for each one. By March, thaw arrived like a rumor people wanted too much to be true. Mrs. Kowalski came out in a visor and yelled across the street, "Do we think it's over?" And someone yelled back, "Don't jinx it," and the whole block laughed. I raked in a sweater that thought it was a jacket, and Maple found a stick it thought was a log, and we worked it out. I heard someone whistle and turned to see Tyler leaving Mr. Whitmore's porch after carrying his groceries inside. "Are you carrying for everyone now?" I asked, not unkind. "If they'll let me," he said. "How's work?" "Better than I deserve," he said. "They let me fix things." "Good," I said. And it was. The second Sunday in April, the church bulletin announced a fundraiser for St. Luke's Shelter, the one Mrs. Kowalski drove them to in the rain. I went and sat at a folding table and spent $20 on brownies like they were diamonds. I noticed Sienna at the beverage station, doing the kind of work that is invisible until it's not done. Refilling cups, wiping rings off tables, asking women older than her whether they wanted decaf. She caught my eye once and smiled like a person who's learned to be grateful for the smallest nod. I nodded back and went home and watered the peonies that might bloom if it didn't frost again like it sometimes does, just to keep you humble. The first really warm Saturday in May, my block had its usual small party. Somebody rolled a grill to the edge of the driveway. Somebody else brought deviled eggs. Kids drew hopscotch and chalk. I made lemonade and a tray of cookies Maple believed were for her. Tyler hovered across the street and didn't cross it until I gave the smallest wave. Boundaries at a barbecue. Look at us. He came over with a plastic fork and a question about how much compost to mix into soil, and I answered like someone who learned the hard way that too much of a good thing can burn the roots. Sienna came later with a bowl of salad that wasn't fancy, but everything in it was chopped with care. Ben sat on my front step and taught a toddler how to feed Maple a treat with a flat palm so no one loses a finger. Mrs. Kowalski wore her visor like a crown and told a story about a goose that had it in for her. The boys on scooters were now nearly young men who still rode them because why not? And they took turns making the scooter whistle sing. At dusk, while the street glowed like a photograph at the edges, Tyler said, "I know I can't ask for much, but I'm going to ask for this. 1 Sunday dinner a month. Noon to 3, we bring the groceries, we do the dishes. You can make the menu or we will. No surprises. If you say no, I'll still keep sending money until the drawer breaks." "Noon to 3, I said, "and you bring the salad." "Yes, ma'am," he said, and looked like a person who'd been given a small plot of land and was planning not to waste an inch of it. We did it. The first one, Sienna made pot roast the way I make it and laughed when I caught her checking my spice cabinet like a person sneaking a look in a medicine chest. The second one, Tyler tried to make my mother's biscuits and failed, and we ate the failures with jam and called them a learning curve. The third one, we made tacos, and I taught them how to use a tortilla warmer like a civilized person. Each time they left by 3, even when the conversation got good at 2:50. They took their mess and their laughter and their new selves and went home. I sat in the quiet and did not grieve. I sat in the quiet and felt like a person who has learned to keep wicks trimmed. By July, the drawer had a year of proof. Patrice said, maybe spend a little of it on a thing you want, not a thing you need. And I acted like I didn't know what she meant and then bought a porch swing that made me feel like a girl in a movie who gets a letter. I showed Ben, and he said, I told you my porch swing work was above average, and we hung it while Maple supervised. That night, while the cicadas said their piece and the street lights buzzed, I sat on that swing and let it remind me that forward and back is still movement. News about Genevieve trickled and then ran. Sentenced, said the headline. I didn't have to read. I didn't tour the comments. I didn't screenshot the falls from grace. I didn't call anyone to say I knew it. I pruned my peonies and scheduled a furnace tune-up and made sure my car registration was in the glove compartment. It's not that the villain got hers. It's that the story went where it was always going, and I didn't have to follow it there to know. The last Sunday in August, it rained the way it rained the night they came back, only this time the rain felt like a blessing nobody got to hoard. Tyler and Sienna came at noon with bags and recipes and a game plan. Maple lay on the kitchen threshold and offered moral support. Sienna pulled a pie out of the oven that looked like penance and hope in one dish. She admitted I burned the first one at home. It tasted like the bottom of my old life. Sounds about right, I said, and cut into the second one like I knew how to bless a thing without baptizing it. After they left, I stood at the sink and washed a bowl, because sometimes a bowl needs washing, and sometimes a person needs to stand in warm water and feel the simple goodness of scrubbing a thing clean. I looked up and saw my face in the window. I recognized it. That seems like a small thing. It is not. Fall came back dressed like it had every right to be gorgeous. Maple learned the sound of the treat jar from a block away and pretended she didn't. The Browns won a game they usually lose. Ben installed a handrail on my back steps, and I pretended not to see the way he watched to make sure I didn't slip. Ruth taught me a dance I swore my knees wouldn't allow, and then they did it anyway. Patrice made me promise not to throw the drawer away, even if I thought forgiveness had walked into the room. Evidence matters when feelings get cute, she said, and I wrote it on a sticky note and stuck it to the inside of the cabinet where I keep my spices. On a Sunday near the end of October, Tyler admitted he'd told his boss everything and hadn't been fired or demoted or called a fool. He said, I've had a mom too, Tyler told me, and the sound he made was laughter with the bruise still on it. After we ate, Sienna stayed back with me while Tyler took out the trash. She touched the corner of the counter, the way women do when words are balancing on a tightrope. I used to look at this house and see everything wrong, she said. Now I come in and I see everything that kept your family going. It's beautiful, Marge. It was then. I'm sorry I didn't have the eyes to see it. I believe you, I said, and she closed her eyes like the words landed on a wound with medicine in them. I still don't know what forgiveness is supposed to feel like when it arrives. I know what a boundary feels like. It's solid under your hand and doesn't move even when the wind wants to push. I know what a habit feels like, heavy and familiar, and not always your friend. I know what a dog feels like when she leans her whole self against your shin while you wash dishes. Forgiveness, though, I think it might be a bridge you decide to test one board at a time. You don't run, you don't throw a parade, you step. You listen. You step again if the first step holds. The first snow came like confetti in early December, and I walked Maple past the house on the corner where the inflatable snowman leans left every year. I waved to strangers and they waved back because that's what you do in a neighborhood where your life is visible and ordinary. I thought of the woman I was the day they drove away, and the woman I was at the sink with the faucet dripping on my head, and the woman I was on the night I closed the door in the rain. I thought of the woman I was on the swing the night the streetlights buzzed and I let the forward back tell me a story. You were not wrong to love. You were not wrong to lock the door. You are not wrong to open it a little at noon on a Sunday when the rules are clear and the clock is part of the ceremony. On the last Sunday of the year, Tyler left an envelope with a note and a receipt for therapy he'd paid for himself. He wrote, "I don't expect the drawer to ever be empty. I just expect to keep working on it." I put the receipt with the others and watched Maple snore through a movie about a small town at Christmas where everyone knows how to be decent. The movie was nonsense. The idea was not. On New Year's Day, I sat with Ben on the porch swing, wrapped in a blanket like kids who got away with staying out too late. He took my hand like someone asking a question, not taking a thing. I let him. Somewhere on the block, someone played music too loud while they took down their lights. I didn't mind. Maple had a new toy and lived like joy was a job she was qualified for. The peony bushes slept under the snow, their roots busy with quiet work. I thought, this is what a rebuilt life looks like. Ordinary, sturdy, mine. And if you're listening and you're where I was, kitchen towel in one hand, keys in the other, watching a car carry your heart away, please hear me say this. The door you close can be a prayer, not a war. Love is not a doormat. It's a home. It can lock. It can open. It can say no and mean I still love you, and both be true. Sometimes love is a casserole. Sometimes it's a deadbolt. Sometimes it's a porch swing hung level and oiled so it doesn't squeak when you move. Sometimes it's a dog that picks your house and refuses to leave. Sometimes it's a son who finally understands that the price of coming back is not crying on the porch. It's walking up the steps with groceries and a plan and a clock you respect. The day after New Year's, I took down the ornaments and left the porch lights up for one more week because Ohio gets dark so early and we need whatever glows. Tyler texted to ask if 2 o'clock still worked for Sunday. I typed noon. He replied, "Yes, ma'am." It made me smile, the kind of smile that doesn't make a sound but warms the mouth. I set a place for me and sliced an onion and told Maple we were making soup. She approved. I stirred until the kitchen smelt like the kind of house you return to because it has a pot on the stove and a woman who knows how to keep a small world running. The doorbell rang at noon, and I let them in. They wiped their feet and washed their hands and obeyed the clock. We ate. We cleared. We stacked the dishwasher the right way. We hugged at the door like people who understand that goodbye is part of the ritual too. At 3, the house was quiet again. Not empty, quiet, like a church after the service, when the sanctuary is full of the echo of 100 small amens. I poured tea and sat on the swing and watched the street live its life. Mr. Whitmore pretending to wrestle his garbage cans like a man who prefers heavy things you can lift to the heavy things you can't. Mrs. Kowalski tying a scarf around her visor like a weatherproof queen. 2 boys whose scooters were now longboards, learning a new trick and falling and getting up and trying again. The truth is, even when you love people who have hurt you, your life keeps going. That isn't a cruelty. It's the mercy you almost missed. Maple stretched, pressed her head into my side, and sighed a sigh that said the day had done what days are supposed to do. Start, carry, end. I rested my palm on her back and watched clouds practice being dramatic and whispered the kind of prayer that sounds like a sentence you might say to yourself when no one is listening. I didn't forget myself this time. When spring returns, and it will, even if winter thinks it has tenure, I'll move the peonies to the sunnier side of the yard like I've meant to for 3 years and never done. I'll oil the swing and repaint the porch railings where the paint started to peel. I'll call the roofer and ask about flashing because the list on the fridge doesn't clear itself. I'll stock the pantry with the kind of things you can turn into a meal when an extra place setting makes sense. I'll say no when no is called for and say yes when yes gives life instead of stealing it. I'll keep the drawer. I'll cash the money orders as they come until there aren't any more, not because I need the money, though maybe someday I will, but because I need the proof that I demanded a new pattern and got it. If anyone asks me what the moral is, the lesson like a fortune cookie, I won't give them a neat line about karma. I'll say this. Boundaries are a kindness you give to yourself and to the people who love you badly. They are not walls to punish. They are fences with gates and posted hours. The people who want to earn a place in your life learn your hours. They don't climb the fence. They don't rattle the latch. They knock. They wait. They come back next month if you're not ready. And when you do let them in, they take off their shoes without being told. I loved my son the day he left. I loved him the night he came back in the rain and I said no. I love him now that he has a set of keys to a different place and a calendar with a box around the second Sunday at noon. That love is not what changed. I did. I learned to let love have a spine. So here's to the women who keep houses and hearts with the same steady hands. Here's to the casseroles and deadbolts and porch swings. Here's to the dogs who choose us and won't listen when we say you should find someone better. Here's to the neighbors who have the quiet grace to look out their windows without looking down their noses. Here's to the sons who learn slow and then learn fast and circle back with proof instead of promises. Here's to daughters-in-law who put away the mascara because they found something better to make themselves with. Here's to the men who carry salt bags without making it a headline. And here's to the ordinary street that holds it all. The rain that embarrasses us and saves us. The chalk that stains socks. The roses that need pruning. The scooters that grow into longboards. The garbage cans that must be wrestled. The street that knows your name and doesn't require you to be anyone you're not. The street that looks for all the world like home.